What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Flow In Flow Out podcast. My name is Sam Nang Man, lifestyle and performance coach, hybrid athlete, and philosopher, and your host for today's podcast. So I'm excited. I have a very special guest today. His name is Zacharia Atya. He's a good friend of mine, fraternity friend of mine, and a really close spiritual teacher of mine as well too. So I'm bringing him on to the podcast today to talk about a very special topic that it's really true and he is an expert on. So I wanted to bring him here, and we're going to be talking about spiritual parenting. And I'm going to give a little bit of a brief introduction of how I know him. So Zachariah and I have been friends for quite some time, but most recently, after we've been going through a lot of life changes, especially divorce and being parents, we just stayed connected. And most recently, I just learned that Zach is very into spiritual work as well too. I didn't realize he was, and we've had some really good conversations, especially when it comes to parenting. So I wanted to bring him on here. Why don't you introduce yourself a little bit? Tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we can get into this topic about spirituality and parenting, and kick it off.
Yeah,
All right.
absolutely. First of all, thank you so much for having me on. It's a real pleasure, to be able to take our conversations to a wider audience. I feel like there's a lot of value that I get out of our conversations and just exchanging ideas and ideals. So first of all, thank you. Second of
Yes.
all, a little bit about myself. I've always been sort of a tech nerd. From a young age, I used to break apart computers and put them back together. I used to play Counter-Strike when I was younger, and that kind of got me into, the dark side of the internet and hacking. And fast forward a bunch of years later, I'm still in the cybersecurity industry, but I've taken some of my personal passions and have transitioned from hacking technology and computers to biohacking. So that's really where my whole
Yeah.
spiritual journey started, was just trying to learn about myself as much as possible and seeing what I'm able to do with all of these things that I've learned, both through experience and through research. And so spiritual parenting is really an extension of my own biohacking and desire to learn as much about myself as possible. And I think when you have a passion for a certain subject or subject matters, people feel that. And so
Yeah.
I've somehow become a de facto source of advice and counseling for a lot of friends and even strangers at times. I I feel that the universe typically just brings people in my life that really could use just a little bit of direction. And I'm taking it and running with it. I'm really owning it. And you have a lot to do with that, Sam. I don't know if you want to touch on like how I even got onto the podcast, but like you're a huge reason, if not the reason why I'm here.
Yeah, I definitely let's definitely talk about that because I think it's very important, especially when it comes to like coaching and like helping friends, especially. And I consider you a really good friend of mine because we've gone through a lot of things and just stayed connected. Um, yeah, just talking with Zach and just like on the spiritual side, it really like felt like he has such a depth of knowledge that a lot of people don't have. And like you said, when you're passionate about a subject or something, right? When you talk about like biohacking and personal development, a lot of it, the terminology is a little bit different. But when I spoken with Zach and talking about spirituality and how he could incorporate it into like parenting, I really thought he was an expert, and I was learning a lot from him as well too. And I invited him to speak a little bit on the podcast about spirituality and parenting because it's such a niche thing. How do we, okay, yes, we work on ourselves, but how do we include that and incorporate that into like our parenting? Because as we get older, that is our life, right? Our kids is pretty much like our life. And how do we influence them in a way that we want to influence them, but also let them be themselves? And from having our conversations and everything, I asked you, and you mentioned you weren't a expert or you didn't feel like you had any credibility. And I was like, dude, you have 99% more knowledge than anyone that I ever spoke about, especially when it comes to parenting. and spirituality. And then you also have your own, you're a single parent as well too. So
Yeah.
we could go into like the little niches and everything. Both you and I are divorced. We're single, and we're also trying to be the best version of ourselves, and also trying to raise these little humans to be the best they can be. And I think when I started talking about that and telling you that you are the expert, you started to feel like you were the expert. And I started to notice that you started posting more on Instagram and being more confident about it. And which is, you know, really that's a big part of coaching, is seeing these limiting thoughts and limiting behaviors. And after that phone call we had together, I was like, oh, I've gotten so good at this where I could just pick it apart like really quick. And I was actually really excited to have you on to the podcast. And then, that's why you're here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, definitely. I mean, like imposter syndrome is definitely real, and honestly, it just comes down to acceptance, and that's going to be a huge topic of what we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah.
You know, there's a concept of letting things go, and very recently I've sort of shifted that paradigm to letting things be, and I
Yeah.
am who I am. And if people look to me as a source of information, then I should own that, right? And
Yeah.
hopefully my confidence is able to be passed on to others in a similar way that your confidence was passed on to me. We're going to be talking a lot about passing things down through generations. So, you know,
Yeah, I mean, I started off just like you. I didn't really feel like an expert. I just did it long enough where people started looking at me as an expert, and then I started feeling like an expert. And that really is one of those limiting thoughts where it can hold people back from like putting content out, whether it be podcasting or more Instagram. It's just these limiting thoughts that you're imposter. Like, but if you lean into your own experience, you lean into your own research and your own studies, and speak from that perspective, I think it's very beneficial, and a lot of people gain confidence from it. Yeah, and then I think sharing our stories together, like you're talking about, like passing off knowledge and influencing each other. I think that's so important. I consider you a brother. I'm sure you consider me as a brother as well too, and sharing those knowledge. But yeah, I think the spiritual side, especially when it comes to men, I think it's something that's important, because some are going, like I've gone through it alone and felt like I haven't been supported, but being connected with people like you and Omar and people that are spiritually connected helps me understand myself and my journey better. So
yeah.
I would love for you to kind of share a little bit about your spiritual practice and how you started to incorporate it into parenting as well too.
Yeah, honestly, I went through a not a tough divorce, actually. I mean, my spiritual practice probably started about 10 years ago, and my then partner at the time was also, a bit of a yogi, and that's really kind of what brought us together, was that aspect of spirituality. But there are certain limiting factors when you're in certain types of relationships, and you know she is a wonderful person and a great co-parent, and I have so much to thank her for. But I think our journeys just took separate paths, and what I realized for in myself was I was really substituting my own ability to validate myself with validation from someone else, right? And so in a
Hmm.
way we were kind of trauma bonded, and so we were extremely helpful in that stage of our life together. And you know what our journeys meant for us just wasn't for us to be together, right? And we're great friends, great co-parents. And when I found myself in this stage of being on my own, it reminded me a lot of growing up, because I'm an only child.
Yeah.
And I spent my entire childhood running from home for a variety of reasons. Home never really felt like home. And so I
Hmm.
constantly tried to fill that void with a variety of things: drinking, drugs, partying,
Yeah.
uh, you know, relationships. We find so many ways to try to validate ourselves. But what I learned the hard way is there's a difference in between happiness and fulfillment. So when I talk about my spiritual practice is really trying to capture this essence of fulfillment, because I realized the things that make you happy won't necessarily make you feel fulfilled, and the
Yeah.
things that make you feel fulfilled won't necessarily make you happy. And so I've really owned that concept, and it really is the guide for how I continue to push myself in certain directions. And at the end of the day, it's really helped me start deciding what is it, what is for me and what isn't for me, and started creating those boundaries that I necessarily had because of a somewhat toxic household when I was younger. And I continued to see these patterns repeat. And, when we talk about breaking cycles, breaking your own personal cycles turns into breaking generational cycles. And so the
Yes.
work just never really stops.
It doesn't. Yeah, I think I remember having a whole conversation. I was like, man, I feel like I've done a lot of work, but I feels like I need to do a lot more work. And something that you helped me with is that you talk about, like, when you're talking about like consciousness and spirituality, and you're starting to expand your thinking, starting to create this, you're starting to illuminate lights, like using like a flashlight, illuminating
Yes.
areas of your brain. And you've really helped me with that as well too, because spirituality is, it's not a linear thing, and people could get into many different ways. And for me, I got into spirituality similar about you. It's about like 9 years when I started really trying to transform myself from the inside. I started meditating and doing more journaling practice.
Yeah.
And then, and it's a good topic to talk about as well too, because there's going to be men listening to this podcast, is divorce is where it could really take you to a place of trying to figure out who you are, right? Because a lot of times when we get into like relationships, we tend to lose ourself in that relationship, because that is who we identify as, is like, I am a husband, I am this person, and I need to be this person. And then sometimes and I know a lot of people struggle with it, is like, when you do become divorced, you're like, who am I during this time? And that's a very transformative process or time where you could learn and do a lot of reflection and really rebuild yourself to the type of person. And you've done that, I've done that as well too. And I want to set a good example that during these very hard, difficult times, we could lean into maybe a spiritual practice or more personal development practice, and really kind of reshape and rechange or the course of your life. And for me, it's just like this last year and a half has been such a transformative process of podcasting and putting more content out. So sharing this is something that I find extremely passionate about. Something that I find very interesting is recently is talking about generational traumas and healing, and kind of the things that you've done. You've done some therapy, and trying to, you spoke a little bit about your childhood and how it could affect you now, and how it could even affect your kids too. So I think the word is epigenetics. That's something I spoke about before, and it's a fancy word. It makes it sound like we're really educated, but really, can you help us break down what generational trauma is and epigenetics from your perspective?
Sure. Yeah. So for me, I'm going to start with a story,
Yeah,
because that's really where I feel like highlighting, what generational traumas and epigenetics, you know, that's how we can help inform people, is through
yeah,
storytelling. So, you know, I have two kids, one daughter and one son. And, my daughter, she's the older one. And everyone says, daddy's girl, all that good stuff. From the outside looking in, it totally looks like that, right? But, trying to dig deeper, I was really trying to understand, there are these moments where, all else set aside, if my daughter were to have done something and my son were to have done something, I realized I was having completely different reactions to the two of them,
right,
right?
right,
And this is actually post spirituality practice. This is post mindfulness. I had done a lot of work, and I realized, I'm like, why am I reacting this way towards my son? I felt this like it wasn't even mine. I felt this um, really aggression. I mean, that really is what it is, and it's tough to admit. And parents, you need to admit your feelings, number one, because your feelings are valid, but what isn't valid is maybe your behavior as a result of your feelings, right? And thankfully, because of what had happened to me in my childhood, I had some very hard lines in terms of, you know, what I consider discipline,
Yeah.
but I still felt that just like deep seated almost aggression. And I'm like, he's a child, right?
Yeah.
Number one, he's learning, he doesn't know better, right? And so I started looking inwardly, trying to figure out what is going on, right? And I realized that that kind of aggression is likely what my father felt towards me and his father felt towards him. And after, I'll never forget, I was sitting and meditating one day, and I was kind of going through a history of myself, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was
Yeah.
having a bunch of flashbacks of different points in my childhood, and there came this one moment, right, where I was in a grocery store and I was sitting under a like a candy display, and I grew up Muslim,
Yeah.
and this was during Ramadan, so during fasting, right? And I remember being so hungry and seeing this candy display, right? And I reached into the candy display and took one out of the display,
Uh,
right? And started eating it. And then I felt just like this energy behind me, right? Like there's just like like just kind of coming over me. And then I turn around and it's my dad, right? And he just has this like just very intense, very scary energy, right?
mm-hmm.
And it was a look. It wasn't even anything that he said, but it was a look, right? And I immediately hid under the candy display and I started crying, and he was like trying to drag me out from underneath, and I was just trying to get further and further under the display, right? And I could just feel that aggression. And I'm a child. I was like 5 years old,
Yeah.
right? And so thinking back, you know, I realized that perhaps there had been generations of a father son dynamic that was highly unhealthy.
Mm-hmm.
And so after that meditation, I set an intention. And so the way I know we're talking about spiritual parenting, but really it's intentional parenting.
Yeah.
It's parenting with intention, right? I made it my goal to break the cycle of this generational trauma. And I'm still not perfect, right? I still kind of catch myself at moments where I get worked up, but thankfully, because of my presence of mind, I'm able to bring myself back into who I am, because those previous generations are not me, and those
Yeah.
previous generations are not my responsibility. What I have control of is my present, but the past definitely shapes who you are. And so this kind of brings it to epigenetics, right? Because epigenetics are not genetic markers that you would be able to identify using like CRISPR or something, right? Like you wouldn't be able to point. It's not like a phenotype where it's like, oh, brown eyes, you know, brown hair. It's almost like a behavioral inheritance
Yes. Yes.
from your past generations, right? And so thankfully, what I've learned through research, and it's really funny. I'm just going to talk about my first experience with epigenetics before my own personal experience, and it's going to sound kind of funny, is the concept of cats and cucumbers. And so
Uh-huh.
for it sounds kind of funny, but if you go onto YouTube and you search cats and cucumbers, you're going to see a plethora of videos where people are showing a cucumber to their cat and their cats are just freaking out, right? And so I did a little bit of digging on this, and it turns out that cats have this inherited memory passed down through generations of their quarrels with snakes. And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
that cucumber is really a snake to them, right? And so I realized like this is a real thing. But then I try to talk about it with people, and they're like, "Cats and cucumbers? What are you talking about? You're telling me to go onto YouTube?" Like, so that didn't work. That didn't work as well as I wanted it to. So I was like, okay, well, there's got to be other examples, right? And so there's been a couple of examples highlighted with rats, um,
Yeah.
where
Tell
where
me,
they've
please.
taken where they've taken rats with highly nurturing mothers and very low nurturing mothers, and then those rats had kids, and they were observing the parenting styles of those rats and what would happen to those children. And I think you can kind of figure it out from there, right? The low nurturing mothers, or the rats that had children when they had low nurturing mothers, were highly anxious, really hard to handle, and super aggressive. Like the scientists literally could look at the behavior of the rat and know what kind of mother or grandmother, really, those
Yeah.
rats had, right? And then it was the opposite for the high nurturing rats.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's a great point. I think epigenetics and like who you're with closely to and behavior plays such an important factor, especially you growing up in a household where, it's your father that is the example of what a man is supposed to be. And then I think when we do a lot of like therapy and like shadow work and start to realize a lot of this and start to break down this, I think one thing I do want to get a point across is, especially when it comes to parenting, especially foreign parents, they could be very aggressive, and that is what they have learned. My dad, like, he's 67 years old now. He's a completely changed man, like different because he's gone through life, but him at the same age that I was at 35, 38 was a lot more aggressive than I am now. And it's not to his fault or anything. It is what is seen through their own parenting. And foreign parents, I think, they rule with the iron fist sometimes and rule with fear, and which can actually play a detrimental effect to kids or as we grow up. I think I remember one thing growing up in like an Asian household is that the parents is the authority, right? We don't speak back when something is said. We listen and they just do it. And I actually took that into as an adult going into like the workforce is, whether I had a supervisor, even knowing that I have like a better idea or something that might have some kind of input, I wouldn't say it. Right. And that
Oof.
I would just be like, okay, my supervisor said that. And I would know in my head, in the back of myself, I like, that's not something that I should be doing. It's something that I actually should be saying and
Yep.
vocal about it, even though they might not completely agree. But as you're, going up as kids and stuff, you have your parents. When your parents, it's not taught to like, hey, to talk back to your parents, right?
Yeah.
That's like a negative thing. So that's something that's important for like bringing up awareness for people if they're in foreign or even in like a toxic uh environment. A lot of those things that are underlying you might not even see. You have to actually go and start to like examine. I'm not sure if you have any input or insight on how that like shapes you and like what you're, like when you're trying to break these patterns, have you done that in your past through like through therapy? Is that where you started to realize some of these patterns coming up?
Yeah, and it actually comes from both ends, right? And
Yeah.
so, I really took a look at my mom, and I realized that there were a lot of tendencies that my mom had that were feeding into who I was, right? And it was
Yeah.
it was serving through sacrifice, which I think is pretty common with women in general. And women typically are taught to serve through sacrifice,
Mm-hmm.
right? Making sure that the household is running, right? Like your desires and needs come after the desires and needs of your children, of your husband. And so women in particular, I think, uh, should do some extra deep introspection on that, because I know what it was like for me. I realized that because of my relationship with my father, and this was actually probably one of the hardest moments for me in therapy. Because of the relationship that I had with my father, I would default to my mother, and so my mom would be really my guide in life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, when I was in therapy, we started talking about this dynamic of how, you know, I thought that my mom was kind of my savior, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there were a couple of elements of, you know, uh, physical punishment from my father's side, rolling with that iron fist, as you had said.
Yep.
And I kept talking about how like my mom was the good parent, my mom was the good parent, and then my therapist was like, okay, give me an example, right? Give me an example of how she supported you when you needed her the most, right? And I was thinking back and thinking and thinking and thinking, and then I had a flashback of my mom being kind of in the other room, right?
Mm-hmm.
When this is happening to me. And, I'm sure she was as scared as I was in those moments, right? She would not, I, I don't blame a lot of people for not being able to speak up in those moments. But I had this kind of illusion of support from my mom that didn't actually really exist. But I kind of like dreamed this up, right? Because at the end of the day, a healthy individual feels secure. A healthy individual feels safe, right? And so I had no semblance of safety. And I realized that that lack of safety impacted me throughout the entirety of my life. You want to talk about that concept of making a mountain out of a molehill, right?
Uh-huh.
I
Yep.
realized that I was doing that all the time, right? Because I never actually felt safe or secure. And so if something at work, even if it was even if it was constructive criticism, right? I would take it as like, oh my God, am I going to lose my job?
Yeah. I mean, that's a real
Right?
feeling, right? It's dreadful feeling,
Yeah.
and I've encountered that as well too, and something that things that we need to work on because that really affects our mental health as you get older and continue to try to improve your life.
Yeah. And so like that that concept of imposter syndrome and like that acceptance that even I, hopping onto this podcast, that was a huge growth moment for me. This moment right now is a huge growth moment for me, right? Because that fear of rejection, not being good enough, right? That fear of not being accepted, which by the way, those are kind of two different things. Fear of rejection and fear of not being accepted are actually two different sides to the same coin, right? And reconciling both of those feelings are highly important because
Yeah.
rejection is a negative feeling and a negative outcome, whereas lack of acceptance is an absence of positivity, right? And you really kind of need those two things to work together. Absence of positivity is not the same as negativity. And so you really need to kind of fight for yourself. And, you know, kind of taking it back to our parents, I realize now that not only am I parenting my children, not only am I parenting myself, but I find myself parenting my parents as well. By the way,
Guys, thank you guys so much for listening to this podcast. My name is Sam Nang, and I just wanted to take a moment and thank you guys for listening to the Flow In, Flow Out podcast. It's been great to have your support, and I want to tell you a little bit more how you can support the community and how we can support you as well too. So, if you like the Flow In, Flow Out podcast, the message that we're putting out, the information, the content, please subscribe to the channel on YouTube. Please subscribe to the channel on Spotify. Please like it. Please share it. Please share an inspiring message. It helps with the algorithm. It helps get the message out to people that need it. So that would be greatly appreciated. Now, if you are in need of more personal development support in those areas of physical fitness, nutrition, mindset, spirituality, anything in that type of area, please book a discovery call with us. We'd love to help you. We'll get some time on the schedule to chat about what your struggles are, how we can help you, and we'd love to support you on that way. And if you are interested in being a part of uh, being a guest on the podcast, please let me know. If you have an aspiring story, if you have something that you want to share, if you have a message that resonates that's similar to what we're sharing here on the Flow In, Flow Out podcast, we welcome you to be part of our show. We're super excited where the growth and the community is growing. So we look forward to having you here, and we look forward to working with you. And thank you guys so much for the continued support and the love, and we'll continue to keep putting out the good vibrations out there to help elevate the collective vibrations. And thank you guys so much.
I have a great relationship with both my parents now, a very meaningful relationship with my father, thankfully, because a lot of people don't have that.
Yeah.
And it's created a huge opportunity for me to connect with them in a way that I haven't been able to before. And I think now that as we get older, a lot of people have a similar feeling, which is I kind of now need to start taking care of my parents, right? And I don't know if maybe if you kind of have this kind of the same feeling.
Yeah. I my I, I'm very lucky, similar to you in your aspect, and I think something to help folks get over, not get over, but kind of help process some of their maybe childhood traumas is accepting that your parents did the best they can with what they had. You know,
Yeah,
I think we're in that generation where, I'm 39, turning 40. I think, we have different, similar demographics that are going to be listening to this podcast, is that our parents did the best they can with what they had, right? They didn't have
yeah.
the internet. They didn't have podcasting. They probably didn't have therapy. They probably weren't even open to having like therapy and talks about like mental health and like doing like shadow work. So you have to be able to accept that fact that they were doing the best that they could with what they can, and that was a point in their life that they did. And even looking through us where we're at right now, it's still very difficult. Even though we have a ton of resources, a ton of support to help us get through this thing, it's still very difficult, right? We still have to go to work, we still have to work out, we still have to take care of ourselves, we still have to feed our kids, we still have to parent, we still have to show up at work. Where there's all these still these responsibilities, and we're not going to be perfect as well too. And I have a feeling when my kids get to like 39 or 40 years old, they're gonna be having that talk to me about like, yeah, this is what you did to me when I was a kid. And I'm like, yes, I'm gonna probably be ready and prepared for it. Right. So you have to put yourself in different situations, in different shoes. But uh, I've been lucky and fortunate enough. My mom recently has passed away for like 15, 16 years, but I still have a really good connection with her spiritually, and really just coming the same thing too. Like with my mother, is like I created the story like she was this perfect person, but she was just there. She was there supportive, but was she there emotionally supportive or be able to express how much she loved me? Not really. Asian people don't do that. I'm sure same in your culture is like there's no I love you, I'm proud of you. There's none of that. There's just like, okay, here's your food and go to school and take care of it. But in that feeling, that they were there, and you look back that they were supportive in that part. But as I gotten older and built my relationship with my father, is having this same conversation and understanding that like he was going through his own struggles, and it makes you learn to accept them more. And it's very interesting. I like how you're talking about like when you start to get as an adult, you're parenting yourself as well too. You're parenting your kids, you're parenting your parents, right? In a way, parenting is, let's talk about parenting and like philosophy as well too, because it, in my idea is like before I became a parent is that you had to be this all controlling person that makes the all the decisions and like has to be this like hard leader. But it's not because your kids are little humans. You're a human that have emotions, and your parents have emotions as well too. So definitely, like, I want to hear about how your idea of like you're parenting yourself first.
Yeah. Yeah, honestly, that was a huge watershed moment for me, was realizing that it's less about parenting your kids and more about parenting yourself. You know, I think first of all, as parents, we also, similar to that, like that mother dynamic and that feminine energy dynamic of having to serve through sacrifice. Uh, I think as parents, we also feel that way about ourselves, right? Like we feel that we are sacrificing. Like I was talking, granted, the woman was single, right? And we were talking, and she was talking about how, maybe one day she would want to have kids, but she was worried about how much she would have to sacrifice, right?
You
And
got
I'm like,
sacked.
well, I was like, like sacrifice is one way to look at it, right? But like at the same time, you know, you really need to nurture yourself and take care of yourself, right? And I feel like I say this all the time, and people probably understand. People probably understand this concept that you can't take care of other people when you can't even take care of yourself, right? And so that's really where I started looking at things differently, as opposed to sacrifice. It's really serving, right? It's
Yeah,
serving
serving.
myself so that I am able to serve others, right? And there's a lot of different ways to do that. You know, making sure that you're, you know, maybe working out if that's what you're into, or art. Like for me, especially post divorce, art became a huge, huge part of my life because that was something that was really for me,
Hmm.
right? And so a lot of people think taking care of yourself, like, oh, I got to go get a spa day. I just need to have a day to myself, right? But like, what are you doing on the daily?
Yeah,
Right? How are you taking care of yourself on the daily? How are you nurturing? How are you filling up your cup? As parents, right? You can think about it as cups, right? And you have your full glass, and you pour a little bit here, you pour a little bit here, and a little bit here. You pour into work, you pour into your son, you pour into your daughter, you pour into your parents, and you pour into your partner, right? And then when you set that cup down, it's looking pretty empty,
yeah,
right? And are you going to have that an empty cup for a week? How much water is that going to give you? Can you nourish yourself with a couple of drops of water and you expect yourself to show up for all those people every day? And then so what do you have to do? If you're going to wait that week or however long you have with those couple of drops of water, you're going to start rationing. How are you going to ration those couple of drops of water across all those cups again? You got to fill yourself up.
yeah.
You got to fill yourself up.
Yeah. I think what you said, I think what really resonated with me is that you have to be intentional with uh what you're doing, especially when it comes to parenting. Parenting is not an easy choice. If anybody there is contemplating being a parent or wanting to be a parent or not even 100% sure, I would suggest if you're not 100% sure if you want kids, don't have kids until you're 100% kids. And there's a lot of different factors that come into it. It's like having the right partner as well too. But if you're intentional and you really want kids, definitely do the personal work because that's where a lot of the growth will come. Because parenting, it really is at the end of the day, I think it's a spiritual practice because it's gonna push you to become the best version of yourself. And when we talk about sacrifice as in things that you will have to sacrifice to make yourself a better person, a healthier person, so you could show up for your kids and your family because that's what's needed. And I was in a point in my life where I was giving away everything, my energy to my kids, to my spouse, to my work. And you feel very depleted at that time. And it's honest, it's just that simple analogy we talk about that you hear all the time, like when you're in an airplane, is put your airbag or your oxygen mask on for yourself first before you could help anyone. I think the analogy that you're using with the water and being able to give to people is you do have to go inside and learn about yourself and rebuild yourself and create meaning behind like especially when it comes to parenting because that at the end of the day it is your legacy. I think tell me a little bit about like you've been doing a lot of intentional work, and for me I've been doing a lot of personal development work, but I haven't been able to or really wrap my brain and include it into like my parenting. I always thought like for me is like parenting or like anything that I do, if I'm a good person, if I'm healthy and I'm in a good state of mind, things are gonna go well. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. You know,
Yeah.
you can have all the best intentions we can, like it doesn't work always like that. But you know, how can you incorporate more spirituality into your parents, because you're developing these people as well too, and not be so uh like rule with an iron fist, because I think that's
Yep.
where the real balance is when it comes into like parenting and spirituality, is having you're in charge of these humans, but you also need to give them space to develop and grow, you know.
Yep. Yeah. So honestly, it kind of starts with this concept and kind of going back to people that are considering having kids. Um, I have one piece of advice for anyone that's about to have a kid, or anyone that is thinking about having kids, and even people that have kids right now. The biggest piece of advice that I can give you is you got to start with yourself. And I'm going to dig into this a little bit more because it's related to what we were just talking about. But everyone is a parent. It doesn't matter if you have kids or not, everyone is a parent. And your parental obligation is to your inner child. And so if you had a childhood like yours or mine, or even if you had moments in your childhood where you had moments of insecurity, and maybe you had a healthy household, but there were moments in school where like maybe your parents didn't support you the way that you wanted to, like maybe you fell on stage in a performance, right? And you just didn't feel as supported. We not all of us have traumas, but we all have moments,
Yeah.
right? And so my biggest piece of advice is to parent yourself the way that you wish you were parented, to help reconcile some of those experiences. And the reason why that's related to spirituality is because it's really digging deep and having the presence of mind. It's mindfulness, right? To
Mhm.
understand what is driving my response in certain situations, right? So one example that you can think about is, you know, parents typically will, I don't know if this was the same for you, right? But parents have this idea that you should ask questions for a lot of things, right? So, and we use questions in a lot of different situations, and we actually make our own lives harder, right? And so, when we talk about mindfulness and we talk about spiritual parenting, it's it's about having a very intentional approach to the way that you parent. And so, again, I feel like parents make their own lives harder in a lot of ways. So, one way that I think parents make their lives harder is the illusion of choice,
Yeah. This is a
right?
good this is good for me too, because I think it's important, because when you're parenting, you want things to go your way, and you also have opportunity like this is also very hard if I continue doing this, because I have two daughters and they argue against me, and I'm like, okay, and then I create this opportunity where they do have a choice. And this is important. I want you to elaborate on this.
Yeah, no, for sure. Because I mean, I even saw it with myself, right?
Yeah.
And one thing that a lot of people should realize is that children do not understand context the way that we do, and so
Yeah.
they take words extremely literally.
Yeah.
So if your kids are off having fun, doing something like playing on the playground, hanging out with their friends, and all of a sudden you poke your head out the door and you're like, "Hey, do you want to help me prepare dinner?" What do you think their answer is going to be?
Like,
Like,
hell no,
really?
I'm playing.
I'm
So,
playing right now.
yeah.
Don't you see what I'm doing? I'm literally a Tyrannosaurus Rex right now. Come on,
Yeah.
like you're gonna stop me from being a T Rex right now? No, that's not happening, right? And so the thing is that you should not make, or you should not give them a choice when really it's not a choice. And there's two things to that, right? So not only are you giving them a choice, but you're setting yourself up to be disappointed and frustrated because you have an expectation, right? And expectations is the enemy of being present,
Yeah.
really. And so if you want to talk about being mindful and being present, you also need to realize that it's your responsibility as their parent to set those expectations for them, right? And giving them an option is not the way to do that. And so one way that you could think about it is, instead of saying, do you want to help me with this? You could say, hey, I feel like you would be really good at this. Come help me for whatever X amount of time, give them an estimate, try to be really clear. Like, clear communication is super important. And I say that to my daughter all the time and my son all the time. Being very clear with communicating your needs, right? And the same goes for you, right? So I think you would be really good at this. Come help me. And you can go back to playing after about 5 minutes when we're done. And that has been hugely helpful in my household. I cannot even begin to tell you what that paradigm shift and that thought process, and it takes practice. You're not going to get it the first time. And don't beat yourself up if you don't get it the first time. But the key is to be consistent.
Yeah. I think the practice and being accepting, because it's not perfect at all. Parenting is, as much as you could try to be as perfect as possible, like there's some days that you're gonna be tired, your kids are gonna be tired, or something's gonna happen. But and I appreciate you sharing that story of how to reframe how you speak to your kids, because that's very important as well too. I've noticed that when my older daughter, Zena, when I'm trying to get her to do something, telling her, I mean, we all understand telling somebody what to do is not just, it's not effective. You know, it's like you tell somebody, hey, you need to go work out and do this and stuff. The information is good, but it's not going to hit them that same way. I think coming from a place of, and same with kids too, like just like the way you spoke is like you coming from a place of like understanding of like, hey,
Yes.
I believe you would be really good at this. I believe you would really enjoy this, right? They really get engaged with that when you start to incorporate them into what they're doing and how they will feel. And I start to notice with my older daughter is that when I start to encourage her on the things that she enjoys, she loves drawing, she loves painting and those kind of things. So we try to do a lot of projects like painting is that something that she enjoys, and I encourage that. And to me, that is something that I try to incorporate, and I think it's helping her spiritually to be more creative and more expressive. But it's hard. It's not one of those things where like you're on it all the time. Sometimes you just want them to do what you want them to do, but unfortunately it doesn't happen. I think that's very important to also accept uh and forgive ourselves when it comes to parenting. I think that comes into like parenting ourselves.
Yeah.
You can maybe chat a little bit about that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and I don't want to come across as like you need to be a dictator, right? Because just like n- making sure that you're not giving the illusion of choice, you need to present enough opportunities for choice when it makes sense as well.
Yeah.
So there's the illusion of choice, but then there's also the power of choice, right?
Yeah.
Like if there's a couple of weekend activities that are going on, giving them the opportunity to say, would you like to do this or would you like to do that, right? Like, do you want to go to the playground or would you like to stay home and paint, right? And what you're doing is, number one, you're making your own life easier again, right? Because as parents, we have a lot of ownership over how easy we're making our lives as it relates to parenting. And
Hmm.
so giving them that choice in between two healthy things is highly useful in making sure that you're also limiting those possibilities. Because if you just say, what do you want to do this weekend? Right?
They won't.
I mean, I don't know like how much of a role TV has in your household, but like TV is virtually non-existent in my household. But I guarantee you that if I ask them, what do you want to do? One of the first options is probably going to be TV, right? And so when you
My
limit the
girls will be like,
realm,
go shopping. They love shopping. They love shopping.
it's it's the same thing, right? Shopping, TV, like, whatever it is, so limit that realm of possibility for them so that you're helping them make healthy choices,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because you're going to feel disappointed when they come up with something that you're just like, what? Really? Like, that's what you want to do? And so and actually, we should probably touch on something that I think a lot of parents struggle with, which is eating and healthy eating.
Yeah,
Because
this is important. I think. Yeah.
we all want, especially you and me, dude. We are wellness gurus, right? We love to eat healthy, right? It's just it's like at this point it's in our DNA, it's in our epigenetics, if you will, right?
Yes,
And so
it is. It is our
and so
DNA.
and so like as you're trying to pass on those epigenetics to your children, right? It's really hard when it's the same concept, because I hear tons of parents, I hear it all the time, like at restaurants and things like that. They say, what do you want to eat? Let's probably do the top three choices: pizza,
French
French
fries,
fries, right?
nuggets,
Ice cream.
nuggets, ice
Are
cream.
those
Yeah.
like none of those things? Like I shudder at the thought of my children consuming Purdue chicken nuggets.
Yeah.
That just like scares me to my core, right? And
Yeah.
so
Again, grows.
if I could provide any insight into making your own life easier, give them the power of choice, but again, limiting that realm of possibility. So a lot of parents, when their kids don't want to eat what they give them, a lot of parents will just make something new. And I know a couple of households where they're having to make sometimes 2 or 3 like full meals a day in order to feed their kids, so they finally figure out how they strike gold. And what are they doing with that food, by the way? Like, I'm going to tie it back to taking care of yourself. What are they doing? What are you doing with that food? Number one, you're potentially wasting money. Number two, you're probably eating that food because you don't want to waste it.
Yeah.
And so a lot of parents have this obligation, like finish the food that their kids didn't eat, or finish the food, or like finish the food that was like left over. That's a great way to gain weight and to become unhealthy, right? And
Yeah.
so let's try something different. All right? Have a plate that's in front of them, and the earlier you start this, the better. I started this, and I came to an agreement with my children's mother that we're going to provide options on the plate. And so you have a few different options. Like this morning, I'll give you an example. This was breakfast this morning. There was an egg sandwich, and it was not even a full egg sandwich. It was half an egg sandwich for each of them. I split the one sandwich in between the two of them.
Mm-hmm.
I sliced a few slices of sweet peppers and put that on the side. And I put some hummus, like a spoonful of hummus. And notice I'm not giving an entire like full meal in huge portions. I'm only giving them a few bites of each thing, right? And so I know that I will be pleased with if they eat one or any combination of those things.
Yeah.
I'm content with the healthy choices that they have available to them. But then what could happen, right? They won't eat one or two of the things, right? Like maybe the egg sandwich didn't hit home, right? Maybe you didn't have the cheese that you normally use, or maybe the hummus, they just weren't feeling the texture of the hummus that day, right?
Yeah, kids are
But
particular.
right, they can
Yeah.
be, and that's okay, right?
Yeah.
Because them knowing what they want is important. right? Because I grew up being told that what I want didn't matter. I want
Yeah.
them to know that their choices matter when it makes sense. And I'm crafting those choices for them, right? That's the power you have as a parent. And so as they're nibbling and you notice, you're observing as a parent, you're observing what they're eating, right? Hey, I noticed that you ate all of your peppers, right? But they didn't eat, maybe they ate like a couple bites of their egg, but they didn't touch the hummus. So what do? I go and get them more peppers, right? And so what you're doing is you're making sure that you're giving them this power of choice and that they're eating well. By the way, I don't force my kids to eat. And parents, really, I highly encourage you, don't force your kids to eat. I'm sure we all have horrible memories of not being able to leave the table until our plate is clear. Children do not have the same appetites as we do. A lot of parents think that they need to be eating as much as we do. And there are different life stages for children at different moments in time. So there are going to be times where they eat more if they're going through a growth spurt. There are going to be times when they eat less because they're sick. My daughter just had a parasite. To this day, we had no idea how she got it. But she could not eat anything.
Yeah.
And she just did not want to eat anything. And that was, when I tell you, this was one of the biggest tests of my patience as a parent, because you know that the only way that they're going to get better is if they eat something nutritious. But everything I put in front of her, she couldn't even stomach it, right? She couldn't even stomach it. And so I'm so worried that like she's gonna die from malnutrition, right? She's not going to, right? She'll be fine, right?
Mm-hmm.
She's on an extremely slim diet, and all she could do was really eat crackers and bread. And I just had to accept that. There are moments that you just need to accept that you're not going to be able to have things the way that you want them to be, right? And
Yeah.
just even having a couple bites of something is going to be sufficient, especially when they're sick, right? These are external circumstances that you really don't have control over. And that kind of goes back to spirituality, acceptance.
Acceptance.
Acceptance of the situation, acceptance of of your feelings, by the way, because your feelings are not invalidated. Going back to emotions, emotions are valid, but your behaviors are not. So an example of a valid emotion would be concern and worry and potentially fear.
Yep.
But
Those are
what
all.
isn't, is your behavior, right? You're not going to leave this table until you finish your food. You need to take a couple more bites of this. You have to do this. You have to do this, right? That that breeds fear. That breeds an unhealthy eating culture, right? Same thing with desserts. If you say you can have dessert if you finish your food, that's another like
Yeah.
not
That's something I
not
gotta worry about. To think about as well. It's something that you want to see them happy and everything. I think this talk about nutrition and food and kids is very important because that's something that I've struggled with, and basically kind of explaining is learning how to accept things as they are,
yeah,
and you bringing up the point that you expect your kids to eat the protein, the carbohydrates, and the vegetables at every meal. Unfortunately, not. They have just different preferences as they get older and they change. And I like the strategy that you have, and it's similar. Like I do that too. Is to try to have a little bit of a variety in their plate, and so have those choices and everything. But I do have to worry about giving them the ice cream and like incentivizing. Hey, if you finish your meal or we start eating, I could get you ice cream and everything. But and I do enjoy giving them the ice cream because I enjoy that time as well too. So at the end of the day, I think there's a fine balance of yes, you want them to eat healthy and they're gonna build these habits. But for me personally, I think the most important thing is us showing us as the example of
yeah,
having an active lifestyle, of eating healthy, because I think they'll see that more often. I think you mentioned that in kind of like what you want to talk about. A lot of that stuff that we do personally is going to affect them more because even as growing up, like I paid a, even as I didn't have a relationship with my father, but he was really the only role model person that I saw. He was like the one that I wanted to be like. So you start to have these habits that you start to build by just seeing somebody there. So I think that's, for me, anybody that's trying to incorporate more healthy eating into their lifestyle, especially when it comes to your kid, is one, you want to eat healthy yourself, right? You don't want to be this hypocritical parent. For me, it's like being a hypocrite is bad.
Yeah.
But I also have to learn how to accept things, which is, in a way, that's the learning process, and that's the growth process, is learning that your kids are your kids, and some days they don't want to eat protein, sometimes they just want to eat bread and butter.
Yeah.
you know they get onto that little kick and everything. But um and then the ice cream, the incentivize, I really have to really pay careful attention of that. And that's something that, even just having this conversation, is I do want to give him ice cream, but I don't want to incentivize him, hey, you eat your meal because and then you get this ice cream.
Yeah.
um and really trying to drive home that and everything. And um
I
you
do
know
find I do find that setting extremely clear expectations beforehand is really helpful. So
yeah,
my kids know before they even start eating whether or not there's going to be dessert.
yeah,
So you take that motivation off the table, right? From the get-go. That means that they're just going to have a meal like they normally already have, but and my kids will ask too. It's like, Tato, are we going to have dessert? Because they're so used to me ask they're so used to me telling them ahead of time whether or not there's going to be dessert that they will ask me. But it's not asking me as in like it doesn't go, can we please have dessert? No. It's actually, are we having dessert? And I say no. And they're like, okay. And it's just like
yeah,
normal for them. Right?
yeah,
And like and like that actually plays into like consistency, which like I know like there's a lot of emphasis in parenting about being consistent. Part of consistency is exactly what you were talking about, which is that do as I say, not as I do idea. Like that is, you want to talk about a toxic way to develop a relationship with your kids. There's so many examples of of that concept of do as I say, not as I do, and what that actually does to them and their way of thinking. And you know how I know that? Me, right? Like I know there have been times where like my mom would tell me like, "Hey, you need to drink more water." My dad actually, my dad used to work for Coca-Cola. So my dad would be like, "You really need to drink water," as a kid, right? I'm like, dude, you're like slurping down 4 Cokes a day. What do you think I want to do? I
yeah,
want to hit
yeah,
that Sprite, you know? Like, and that was like, after a long day of basketball, was I drinking water? No. I would head to 7-Eleven and hit a Sprite, you know?
yeah,
And so having that consistency, not just in what you present to them, but what you present to yourself is super important. And you know, there's a lot of stress on schedules and things like that. That's kind of not what I'm getting at in this respect. When I talk about consistency, I mean the exception. Anytime you make an exception, and this is going to sound kind of hard, but again, you're crafting their understanding of life. And so when you make an exception to something, that exception becomes the standard.
yeah. I love it.
And so when I think about the most helpful things that I've done for myself as a parent, it's being extremely consistent. If I have never once said 5 more minutes, and when my kids have come back to me and said, "Can we play for 1 more minute? Can we play for 5 more minutes?" No. The answer is always no. And that has helped me immensely. They don't even ask anymore. 5 minutes is 5 minutes, and I say, "Let's go," and they're out of there. And
Yeah,
I've seen people like dragging their kids out crying, and I hate to break it to you, you did it to yourself. And it's part of being intentional and part of setting expectations. Children do not like surprises. I don't care what anyone says. Surprise gifts, who's not going to be happy with a surprise gift, right? But surprises in other forms is not fun. That's why if you don't tell your kids 5 minutes before they have to leave and you just say, let's go, that's why they're throwing a tantrum. Because you
Yeah.
surprised them, you caught them off guard. They don't want to leave. But when you set that expectation, when you set that intention, hey, we're leaving in 5 minutes, it's going to be in their head. And by the way, when you can, make eye contact. Make sure they're looking at you when you're communicating to them. So I don't know. There's a lot of there's a lot of things that I can get into in terms of like being consistent and setting expectations. But really, like parents, you got to make your life easier. Like, don't do it to
Yeah.
yourself.
I think this podcast, the goal of it is to bring a little bit more of awareness, and awareness is important. It's a practice,
Yeah,
of just being mindful of like what you're doing, and having like podcasts, having different insights, and having the ability to like change some of these patterns that that it is something that you're doing out of just ease. So I think a lot of it ends up being because we do it because it feels easy at the moment just to bend. I think for me, that's where I've gone to in parenting, where I know I want something and I want to stand strong. And yeah, that 5 minute goes into 10 minutes, it goes into 15 minutes. And then, yeah, learning, bringing, like, that is what I did to myself. I trained my kids to really like push these boundaries. And my goal now is just to be a little bit more aware of some of these things. I know it's not perfect or anything. But my question for you, Zach, is you're a single parent and you've gone through a lot of things, and as well too, you started to incorporate more holistic approaches, as in like working out and meditating. Where do you squeeze that into your schedule? I know there's a lot of people out there that have kids, and it's one of those biggest questions is like, I don't work out because I have kids, I have work, I have all this things that I need to do to take care of, especially when it comes to like mindfulness practice. How do you incorporate it into your life? And how yeah, I mean, some advice for other parents that out there that might try to be incorporating more mindfulness practice into their lives.
yeah. I mean, it's really about knowing yourself. Like, for example, when it comes to going to the gym and working out, proximity is super important to me because of
Yeah.
how busy my life is, right? I could pay $20 a month and go to Planet Fitness, right? Because we're all on budgets, right? And I can go to Planet Fitness, but Planet Fitness is all the way in Alexandria, right? Which for some of the people that aren't in Virginia, that's about like 25 minutes away. A 25-minute drive to go work out just doesn't make sense for me. I know that I need to be able to get to my gym and back in like 5 minutes, right? So just like in business, location, 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 for me, it's the same with working out, right? And at the same time, there's a lot of things that you can do at home to stay fit. And the benefit of staying fit at home is that your kids get to watch, especially if
Yeah.
you especially if you make it fun, right? So they are actually visibly seeing you um, improve and be healthy. And I don't know about you, but I smile when I work out,
Yeah.
right? It makes me happy to work out, right? And when they see that happiness, they feel that energy, they feel that fulfillment, they want to do that too, right? I do boxing workouts at home. I also go to Bash as well, but I do boxing workouts at home, and that's how my daughter actually got involved with MMA,
Yeah.
right? She was watching me at home practicing my boxing, right? Practicing my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then she was like, and then she asked me one day, she's like, Tato, can I go with you to your boxing practice when you leave? Or can I do your boxing practice with you at home? The answer is always yes when she wants to do the boxing practice with me at home. And I said to her, I mean, that's actually for adults, right? But why don't we figure something else out? In the back of my mind, actually, what I was thinking is boxing is not really practical self defense. And if I want my daughter to be able to defend herself, so I'm going to sign her up for something that actually gives her practical fighting skills, so that
Yeah.
she'll be able to defend herself in the future. And so that's why I took her to MMA,
Yeah.
right? And that was a whole other parenting experience, which I probably don't have time to talk about now. But like, there was a lot of growth in her just even going to a group class. You know, she expressed kind of like group kind of performance anxiety in the past, and the fact that she came to me, right? Because whenever we would try to sign her up for dance or ballet or gymnastics, she would always get intimidated. She didn't want to like perform in front of people. But it was the thing that I was doing that made her overcome that boundary, that
Yeah.
self-limiting, that self-limiting, uh,
Really. Yeah,
exactly.
it's so powerful when you see somebody very close to you doing that, because it gives you permission, it gives you the ability, like, to say, oh, like, even like, I started bodybuilding because my father started bodybuilding. I started bodybuilding without even like consulting with a coach or anything. I just saw my dad doing it from his old pictures, and it's something. And I think that's, epigenetics at work, is that when you work out, when you dance, when you do something, it raises your vibrations, and vibrations naturally, you are the biggest energy source in, say, the household or the leader. And then you have these little kids that are looking up to you. That energy, I believe, really transfers to
Mm,
them, like happy
yes,
genes.
yes,
And that's why pay so much attention about my mental health and my physical health, because these things, even though they might not see it now, but that is genetically affecting them as they get older. And it's so important. I think parenting is such a very hard job. Not We don't talk about it a lot, some of the struggles that we go through as parents, because that's something that's always on our mind. And I think for me personally, my personal philosophy, and I appreciate you sharing all the wisdom and all the knowledge that you have, and I've gotten so much insight from what you shared, is really come down and being more intentional, more aware about
yeah,
yourself, how you
yes,
control yourself. Because a lot of the reactions, like I said, like you said, it's a reaction to not the kids itself. It's a reaction to how you are processing your own emotions. So I think one thing, talk about that. And we've had some great conversations. If there's anything else that you want to, leave with our audience, about parenting, personal development, and spiritual growth, please say what you need to say.
yeah, no, absolutely. So, first of all, you're not going to raise anybody else's vibration by telling them to, right?
You
Like
can't do that.
if you look at vibrational, anything that's vibrating, right, and anything that's similar in terms of in that space, right? When you have a vibration, which, so let's just use ourselves as an example. We are all vibrating organisms, right? You can't transfer that vibration over a space, right? And so it's important to develop a healthy relationship with your children so that they feel safe enough to come closer to you, right?
Yeah.
Because the only way that you can increase the vibration of things around you is through closer proximity. So raising your own vibration, doing things that give you fulfillment, those are the things that are going to help you increase your vibration. And naturally, people will just gravitate towards you, whether it's people or your children or anyone else, right? They will gravitate closer to you because you're having a presence of mind. You're showing a sense of fulfillment that they probably just aren't used to, or that they're really just learning from you, right? And they're just reflecting from you, right? And so when you look at anything that's vibrating, anything that comes closer that is maybe off vibration or is not as vibrating, as much, the closer it gets, the more the vibrations start increasing, right? And it's the same thing with us as people, right? Increasing our vibration. Well, like, how can you do that? I'm going to leave you with two different things, right? Number one, you have to create a safe space for yourself. Safety is the core of all of this, right?
Yeah.
So, how do you do that? How do you create a safe space? Our notion of safety and security comes from our inner child, right? So, heal your inner child. Be the parent to yourself that you always wish you had when you were that age. That's step one, right? Create a safe space. And only when you're safe are you able to express your individuality. And so, after you're done healing your inner child, you got to take care of that angsty teenager. We all went through a lot of things during our teenage years. So after you're done healing your formative years, that teenager is next. We went through a lot of things growing up as teenagers. We saw the rise of the internet, got exposed to
Mhm.
information that we never knew we had access to. Porn, for men especially, porn was a big one, right? Healing that relationship with sexuality and sensuality is key, right? And so after you're done healing your inner child, work on that angsty teenager and help that angsty teenager understand and accept their authenticity and their individuality. When you can do those two things, heal your inner child to create safety so that you're able to set up that teenager to express their individuality, your vibration will raise so much. And I'm speaking from personal experience. It's incredible. And so I find that I've only been able to find the communities and the people that are for me naturally through the flow of life by raising my own energy. So before
Right.
you take care of anyone else, you have to take care of yourself. Please do it for yourself.
I love it. That's a very powerful message, Zach. And part of the mission of the podcast is to help elevate the collective vibrations. And we talk about vibrations and how we could affect each other, how we could influence each other in such a powerful way. And that message about inner healing is very important because a lot of those stuff do tie into how we act and how we show up to our life every day. It's that inner feeling of a lot of those feelings we do carry as we get older and not being able to process and learn those emotions of feeling neglected or feeling not supported or feeling not enough self-worth, right? Those are all real feelings that we carry as we get older. And you've done the work. I'm doing the work, and really bringing light of this type of work uh, brings a lot of healing and a lot of help, like impact on a lot of people's lives. And I appreciate what you've done and what you shared here as well too. I think helping us create a safer space online with this podcast as well too. So hopefully it inspire you to kind of start reaching out and going into your own content creation path, and then helping heal the inner child. This is a talk that I think this is a fairly new term for me as well too. I haven't uh, heard this term, but every time I meditate, I've always meditated on how I felt as a kid. So I'm starting to do this work and starting to speak more about it as well too. And that I love the way that you put it, that we are still parenting ourselves, our own inner child, that we still need to take care of as well too, because as, like be honest, as we get through like being adults, we become more conscious, become more aware of our own emotions and emotions itself as you get older. And I've dealt this with myself, especially going through divorce and going through my own mental health issues, is that we had to find a way to take care of our own mental health, our own inner child, and be around people that are like-minded is very beneficial. I think, I appreciate our friendship, our connection that we've had together, and we're going to continue to grow. And I hope this message shared or, resonates with other people about the intentionality that's required for us as we get older and what we need to do. But very inspiring, very empowering message. And appreciate you having or coming on to our my podcast. And it's also too, like when I have people and guests come on to the podcast, I'm excited to have them on to share the expertise, because at the end of the day, you are extremely passionate about parenting, spirituality, and personal growth. And I hope nothing but continued growth for you as well too. And I see a bright future for you as well, Zachariah.
Yeah, honestly, Sam, thank you so much for this opportunity and the platform. Thanks for pushing me. You know,
That's
thanks for
meant to.
helping me realize the validation that I need to give myself, right? And giving me the safe space and being able to have this relationship with you. I'm so grateful to have you as my brother, as an only child. I'm really grateful to have you as my brother. And I
Yeah,
just hope that there there's something in this podcast for everybody. So I know we were talking about parenting today, but I've listened to your other podcasts. There's definitely something for everyone. So I encourage anyone who's having a first time listen today or is continuing to listen, you know, please come back, ask Sam questions, reach out to Sam. He's a great resource. And if you like, you can reach out to me on Instagram as well.
yeah.
We'll have that information posted up for you
I'll
to
link
find.
I'll link Zach's Instagram on the show notes, and you have been putting some content out there, and I love it. Just taking action and really, when we talk about raising and elevating the collective vibrations, is just being okay with yourself, with sharing some of your experience and being okay, because there's a lot of people that deal with the same thing. And I think that's what's resonated a lot with my listeners and podcasts. And there is a little bit of everything for everyone when it comes to fitness, spirituality, and books, goal setting. Personal development is this whole area of everything, right?
Yeah,
If you could look at everything, whole life is, at the end of the day, it's spiritual. You're growing, right? The more you're growing, the more spiritual you are, the more you are becoming yourself. And that, I believe, is the process of individualization, the process of helping each other become more of your own person. But yeah, man, I'm glad and I appreciate our connection and what you've done, and I'm proud of your work. Okay.
yeah. Thanks, brother. Love you, man.
All right, guys. Thank you guys for tuning in to the Flow In Flow Out podcast, and we'll see you on the next one and listen on the next one. All right, guys.